Welcome to Tell Me About It, a podcast by SLPs for everybody. My name is Francie,
And my name is Maggie.
and today we are talking about just the big, broad world of disability. I think sometimes it's easy for Maggie and I to get really sucked into the nitty gritty and the complexity of disability because that is the population that we work with day in and day out. And a lot of people don't. We are in the minority of people who do this. So,
Yeah, so I think we, I guess, are going to kind of talk about disability theory a little bit today, which neither one of us are necessarily experts on this topic, but we definitely have more um, personal experience with it and more professional experience with it too. And I think just in conversations that I've had with just people I know, I don't think it's common knowledge that there are models of disability or theories about disability in general and how we as people and as a society interact with it. So we're going to get into a little bit of that today.
absolutely. I feel very fortunate in my training through undergrad and grad school. I was able to take several psychology of disability courses. I took a global perspectives in disability course, and so I feel really grateful to have had that going into the career that I have now. Because I feel like when you know these models of disability, it's easier to navigate conversations with families, navigate
Mhm.
conversations with other professionals about the children for us, adults for whoever works with adults, the people that you serve. And so it's an interesting way to kind of frame tough conversations about things that impact a lot of people. I was doing some just a little bit of pre-research just to make sure I was it's been a minute since I was in grad school.
Yeah, kind of dust it off a little bit.
Yeah, kinda dust that off a little bit, and so, according to the legal definition, I'm using disabilityphilanthropy.org for some of this information. They have a fact sheet, Disability 101, that I am pulling this information from. According to the legal definition set forth by the Americans with Disabilities Act, a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. That's a really broad definition. That can mean so much, and that looks different for so many people.
Yeah. And I think as we're talking through these different theoretical models, I just want to say, it's not that any of them are right or wrong
Mhm.
necessarily. There are definitely models that Francie and I personally ascribe more to and that make more sense to us based on our worldview and our perspectives and our education and training. But that's not to say that if you're a person listening to this and you hear about one of the models and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of how I view disability." It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you're looking at it a different way. So, there are some
Yeah.
things that these are kind of theoretical models. They're not
Mm. Th they
empirically provable type of.
Right, these are more like lenses to view a situation
Mhm.
through or frameworks to view something through rather than something empirical that you can apply to a situation. So
Totally.
think of them more like lenses as opposed to, um, gospel truths, if that makes sense?
I think that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, it's a lens. And it can be really helpful to know about different lenses and where people are coming from, because that can kind of help you understand, as maybe even an outsider in a situation, why someone is acting the way that they're acting, or why a group of people may be advocating for certain things, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Absolutely. This fact sheet also says that who's a part of the disability community. We mentioned that this is kind of a broad definition. And the CDC estimates that in the United States, 1 in 4 adults have a disability. And I think it's important to note, first of all, that's a lot. Second of
mhm.
all, disability is one of the only to be disabled is one of the only protected classes of people that anybody can join at any point in time in their lives. Oftentimes when I think about disability, I kind of frame it and this can be kind of I don't know the word I'm looking for. This is my perspective on this is kind of not crass, but just blatant. Either you're born with a disability or you've lived long enough to develop one. This
Yeah.
is something that impacts so many people. And so, yeah, 1 in 4 adults. I thought that was a really fascinating little fact that I pulled from this today. Did not know that.
Totally. And I think that is something, A, that statistic about 1 in 4 adults, is that like point prevalence or like lifetime
That
of
I
like
believe that's lifetime. It just says
okay,
on the sheet that the CDC estimates that in the United States, 1 in 4 adults have a disability. Disability cuts across class, gender, race, ethnicity, and disproportionately affects people living in poverty, women, and people of color, which is true.
yeah, and we can touch on that too because I think that when I was in school and first kind of wrestling with these concepts, it was hard for me to understand at first why it disproportionately affects um, low income populations, people of color, women, etc. And we'll get into that a little bit later too. But something else I wanted to say was disability is a lot more common than people realize. A lot of times, I think maybe some of the popular views of disability are thinking about things like autism, which is really having a big kind of pop culture moment right now where lots of awareness is being raised, which is great. Or things like Down syndrome, which is kind of a more common, um, I guess, recognizable genetic difference because of the phenotype that comes along with it, that the kind of stereotypical facial features and that kind of thing that come with Down syndrome. So people tend to maybe think along those lines, but people can have disabilities of all kinds. It can range in severity. So people might be mildly impacted all the way up to really severely impacted and need assistance for every aspect of their day. So, yeah, I think that's when you really broaden your, I guess, horizon of what disability actually is, it makes sense that 25% of American adults would have some form of disability.
Right? This includes anything from the developmental conditions that you talked about. It can include limb differences, spinal
Mhm.
injuries, it can include mental health or issues and things like that. And so, yeah, that's a really wide net to cast. And also, disability is something that can be kind of fluid. I think about people with chronic illnesses where maybe they're not experiencing their activities of daily living being impacted all the time. But when they're in a flare, they are really impacted. So that's kind of a fluid model of disability. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people being impacted by this. So
Totally. All right, should we get into some of these models of disability?
let's do it. We've got 4 main models that we will be looking at: the charity model, the moral model, the medical model, and the social model. The first model, charity, is the perception of people with disabilities as tragic victims of their circumstances who are in need help from non-disabled people who presume to know what's best to fix the problem, heavy air quotes, of the disability. I feel personally, I don't resonate with this.
Mm.
Just out of the gate right here. Some people I feel like the charity model is also where inspiration comes in a lot.
Ooh,
It's
define
yes, let me get a
inspiration.
better definition than the one that I can get
Well,
off the
and I
top of
wanna
my head.
say, yes, I would love to put in a working kind of definition for this for our conversation because I think that inspiration, especially since it has that P word in it, is very inflammatory.
Ye
And that is on purpose. It is meant to evoke an emotional response. So let's chat about that because I it's going to come up in this discussion a lot.
yes. So Stella Young, an Australian disability advocate, coined this term, which talks about the objectifying of disabled people as models for inspiration for able-bodied people simply because they are disabled. So
Mhm.
it is able-bodied people kinda getting off on the fact that disabled people are accomplishing things, and it's so inspirational, and wow! I hear oftentimes too from people within the disabled community that, like, the baby clapping, like, "Yay, you did it," kinda comes along with this too, and where you're not focusing on the lived experience of the person with a disability, but rather what they can do and how that benefits you as an able-bodied person, or how that makes you as an able-bodied person feel good. And
Yeah.
previously, Maggie, I know you've talked about how it is not the responsibility of the person with a disability to make the people around them feel more comfortable, and I
Mhm.
feel like this really plays into that, where it is a way for able-bodied people to interact with disability in a way that doesn't make them feel weird. even though it is weird.
Yeah. I think like heavy on the objectification. And I
Heavy
think
on the
that's where
objectification.
that term like inspiration porn comes from because
Yeah.
yeah, it is kind of taking the lived experience of this person, which is multifaceted and complex, and boiling it down to something that's like kind of a quick hit of, oh, wow, I can feel better about myself because I'm celebrating this person. I'm celebrating one thing that this person did because I didn't think they would be able to do it, but they can. It's just it's that
Yeah.
objectification piece, like
Right, which
using someone's experience for your own
mhm.
emotional gratification.
Yes, and kinda going back to that charity model, it really views people with disabilities as victims, and so that inspiration side comes in because, wow, they're overcoming, and oh my
Mhm.
gosh, look at that. They are so inspirational because they are, victims that are overcoming something that has been dealt to them, and that's just, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
resonate with that model personally, but that's how I see things like inspiration being woven into culture through this model of disability. So,
Which I will say in defense of this model, which
mhm,
again, we're not really here to, I think it's totally fair to say kind of which ones we resonate with and which ones we don't. We're not here to really necessarily say that any of these are 100% correct or 100% false. I think they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Some, in my opinion, have more weaknesses than strengths. um, in defense of this model, though, I think that we as a culture had to start here to get other places.
I agree with
So,
that. I agree with that.
historically speaking, so when we know better, we do better, right? And science has made leaps and bounds within certainly our lifetime, Francie, you and I, but in living memory, the past 50 or 60 years, we have grown in our societal knowledge of disability by exponential amounts. So if we think back to the 1930s, 40s, 50s, when maybe medical advances were making it so that children born with congenital disabilities were surviving past infancy. Because the hard truth about a lot of this is that we see more disability now because we've gotten better at keeping people alive. People used to just die
People
in
that
infancy,
Maggie
and
quote of the year, people used to just
people used to
die.
just die. Yeah. And so when we started seeing more disability, I think the charity model was kind of born from the, hey, maybe we should take care of these people.
And maybe this is a good thing,
Yes, because
which
again, like, kind of part of the dark history of this is that oftentimes in a lot of cultures, um, and I'm not talking like ancient cultures, I'm talking like 1950s England, 1950s America, babies born with congenital deformations or abnormalities or differences were just left to die. They would be left to starve to death. They would be left, abandoned by their parents in an orphanage or a hospital or whatever. So I think this charity model and that kind of emotional plea and that pity, for lack of a better word, came from a really good place of let's take care of these people because they deserve care and they
mhm,
deserve to be seen. So even though it doesn't get it 100% right, and it can lead very quickly to objectification, my kind of defense of this model is that I think we had to kind of go through this to get to the progress that we're seeing with some of these
right.
other models.
Well, and you kind of mentioned it. So the next model that we were going to talk about was the moral model. And in the moral model, this is according to the American Psychological Association. In the moral model, disability is seen as having meaning about the person or family's character, deeds, thoughts, or karma. From this perspective,
Mhm.
disability can carry stigma, shame, and blame, particularly if the disability is a mark of wrongdoing. Sometimes, on the alternative, it can be a sign of honor, faith, or strength. So I think that kind of goes to what you were just saying. Before we had the charity model, we had the moral model, and so
Mhm.
people would view disability as a moral wrongdoing or not, largely wrongdoing, I find, in my experience, and that is tragic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there are still tendrils and like vestiges of that today. A lot of people, maybe tied to religious beliefs or other, worldviews, do tie disability to some kind of wrongdoing or sin or evil or
Yeah,
what
or
have you.
condemnation from a higher power or
Hmm.
something,
Or like a
right?
punishment for
Mhm.
some cosmic wrongdoing. And yeah, again, we're not going to sit here and say that's 100% wrong, but we are
Mhm.
going to challenge that worldview a little bit and
Yeah.
say,
Well, and then going further down in this description is kind of going to that one highlight, and I do like this, which is disability may also be perceived as a positive reminder for having survived a really tough challenge, something like polio.
mm,
People who lived post polio with lifelong effects that might view their disability as something to be celebrated because of the strength that they had to survive and as a reminder of their survival, which I do think that's kind of special and
yeah,
good. Yeah.
I don't think I've actually like ever thought about kind of flipping it,
Mhm.
where it's like this is a reminder. The person that immediately comes to mind is oh, she's the main character of Soul Surfer, Brittany.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Hold on.
Yeah, let's look her up. Hamilton, is that her name? Brittany Hamilton? Bethany Hamilton.
Bethany Hamilton. Yep.
Yes,
Bethany Hamilton.
Bethany Hamilton. So she was or is, she's still alive, but she was this young surfer who was attacked by a shark as a teenager and lost most of one of her arms and survived the attack and went on to continue being a very uh, proficient surfer. And I believe, I can't remember like, I'm not really big into surfing, so I can't remember like what titles she won or anything, but she went on to be a professional athlete. And so I guess that would kind of fall under this view too of this being a reminder of a challenge that she did have to overcome. And I think that's kind of in like, if we're approaching this in a nuanced way, and that's why I keep saying like they're not 100% wrong. And it's because if we said this model was 100% wrong, we should never like
Ascribe morality or
ascribe
whatever.
morality or whatever. Then a story like Bethany Hamilton's would be meaningless, and we would be erasing the hardship and the pain and the grief that she did go through when her life changed in this big way, and she encountered this like massive physical and emotional trauma that she then was able to work through and overcome to an extent. So that is kind of like the flip side of it, where it can really easily lead to objectification, I feel like, but there's also a way to see that and appreciate that and celebrate it that isn't objectifying.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between celebrating human resilience and celebrating the overcoming of disability, if that makes sense. It's like a really fine line, and so, like, I love her story because it is a testament to her strength as a human being, and I
Yeah.
love that.
Or even thinking about people that have developmental disabilities. So, like, if someone really, really struggled in school and didn't think that college was in the cards for them, didn't think they would ever graduate with a degree and worked and sacrificed, and eventually graduated from college. Like, that is something to be celebrated, and their disability is a part of that story. So, yeah, it's
Once
this
again,
really weird
it's
kind of
these are why these are
nuance.
lenses. This is why these are lenses that we view things through. It gives you different perspectives on the same thing that we are looking at, right? If we're looking at the concept of disability, it's good to view things from different lenses and feel them out, whether that's the kind of negative side of the moral lens or the positive side of the moral lens. This is why we sit and we discuss these things.
Yeah. And of course, like the flip side, the ugly side of this moral lens is looking at a child born, with some kind of disability and saying, okay, well, what did this child's parents do to cause this disability, when the truth is disability just happens.
Yeah.
Developmental disabilities happen. It's not necessarily caused by some kind of transgression committed by a parent, or a family member. That is a really ugly thing to say to someone, and is also just, that is provably false. So we can say that for sure. But yeah, there's these lenses are, complicated.
They're complicated, and they're meant to stretch you. When we were going through this professionally, it was meant to stretch how we thought about disability and kind of help to wrap our brains around the people that we were getting ready to serve. And so to know different perspectives where people might be coming from, because I've worked with families who have had kind of that negative side of the moral disability lens where they did feel like this was some type of failing on their part. And gosh, that's not true. And so to know these different models help me to kind of stretch my brain and to be sensitive to families who do feel like it is and help coach them and walk with them through that process. And
Yes.
so it's a good little brain exercise, for the lack of a better
Yeah.
term. I don't know. It's good to stretch your brain in these ways. So,
I think about uh, back when I was in grad school, I heard a seminar from a parent of a girl with Down syndrome who was diagnosed at birth with Down syndrome. And this family obviously turned to their community, having a disabled child, and told the people they were close to and were trying to navigate this new medical world that they were a part of. And someone in their circle said, like, we'll be praying that the demon of Down syndrome will be lifted from this child. And the mom, in telling this story, was just talking about how guilt inducing and unhelpful that
what
was.
what a slap in the face. I
Yes.
mean, truly.
Yeah. So it's this mom that is already recovering from birth and in the thick of postpartum, as any mom would be, and is also trying to navigate this totally new world for a daughter that has a diagnosis that they were not expecting. And then to have someone be like, okay, well, we'll pray that this demon is released from your family. That's like, oh, I was turning to you for community, and you
Hey,
started talking about something else.
this is a newborn. This is not a demon.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Oh,
So it's important to know that these things do happen, and
yeah.
that um, uh, that is really how some people are approaching disability and conversations about disability. So it's important to know, especially as professionals.
Mhm. Agreed entirely. The next, hold on, I got a cough. Oh, this is the demon of coughing has been not yet expelled from my body.
'Tis the season.
'Tis the season.
Yeah, I just got finished with a steroid burst last week of prednisone for 5 days, taking like a really high dose of prednisone,
Do you
and
wanna know
it was
something so sad?
awful.
Do you wanna know
What?
something so sad? I'm allergic to prednisone.
Oh, really?
Yes, isn't that
What
the
is it?
weirdest thing
What
ever?
happens?
I, like, vomit violently.
Oh
For
gosh.
some reason, like, my body can't process but the weird thing is I can take the artificial version of prednisone, prednisolone, and be
Oh,
fine. So,
okay.
I don't know why, but it makes you yeah, no, I get a rash, I get vomity, it's so fun. That was more information than this podcast needed to know, but
That's okay.
it really sucks when it comes to getting sick because 'cause they're like, "Oh, let's give you prednisone," and I'm like, "Please don't.
No,
Puke fountain, send me to
please.
the Bellagio. It's not a good
Yeah,
time,
you make me
okay?"
sicker. Well, and I usually do fine on steroids, but prednisone is one that people are always like, that's like a famous one for like making
Right?
you crazy. And
Yes.
I, took it in the morning with food and stuff, but yeah, I slept horribly the whole week. I was super on edge. Like the last day of it, I felt like I was being hunted for sport. Like it was terrible. I was like so just like heightened and afraid. Some people it makes them like angry, just like really like
Just
furious.
rage filled.
Yeah, and I was just like, I felt like a little rabbit that had been spotted by a hawk for like 48 hours. It was terrible. but it did solve the cough problem. So
I do love that for you, and I will probably cut this, but I forgot let me tell you, this whole sickness for Francie has made my POTS be like, punch me in the face. So
yeah,
I forgot that Sudafed is an amphetamine and will make my POTS worse. And I'm used to taking only 4-hour Sudafed, and if I take 4 hour Sudafed, I can take 1 in the morning and then be fine, and it doesn't mess with my POTS.
yeah.
Jack bought 12-hour Sudafed, and I did not realize it,
Oh
and
gosh.
I woke up on a Sunday, and I was like, "I think I'm gonna die."
Yeah,
And I was like, "What's my resting heart rate right now?" 164.
girl.
And I was like, "I have to I have to go get tires today. Oh, no, I gotta go to Costco." And so I called my mom. I was like, "Paula, you gotta come get me. I gotta get these tires."
164 is
It's crazy.
you're like
And
sitting
so
down.
oh, yeah, no, I was, like, on the floor of my bathroom because I just got done with the shower too, and I was finally laying down, and it had come down to 164, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So anyways, call Paula, bless her, she drove me to Costco, and this is also how I found out that a Costco hot dog has 78% of a normal daily recommended intake for sodium,
That
um,
totally makes sense.
and
That
so
totally tracks.
I'm telling you, like, raising from the dead, I had 1 Costco hot dog and a Diet Coke, and 40 minutes later, I
You're
was
like
back from the dead.
resurrected.
Felt great again, and so, yeah, that was crazy, and I stopped taking the Sudafed, and I was like, "Oh, I feel so much better now." So
Yeah,
anyways
I really on the last couple days of this steroid burst, I was like, Turner, I think my anti-anxiety medication has stopped working because I've woken up in a white hot terror for the past 2 days. And then
mhm,
the steroids kind of worked their way out of my system. And I was like, oh no, I'm
mhm,
fine. I'm
yeah.
normal again.
2 days before the 164 incident, I woke up and my heart was, like, pounding, and I was like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
must have just gotten hot in the night." Like, that happens sometimes.
Nope.
I was
Sudafed.
drugging myself on accident, so it's
Damn,
fine.
girl. That
It's really fun.
164 at rest is crazy.
Crazy.
Like
Crazy.
I've been running more recently, and at the end of my run last weekend, my heart rate was up at like 174. And I
Mhm.
was like, I need to cool down. Like, I need to I'm like, this is good. I'm in the like red zone or whatever they call it. I don't know. In like zone 4 heart rate or something.
Right.
But I was like, that you're not supposed to stay there for long.
No. Anyways, do I think it's absolutely silly and ridiculous that I have this condition that makes me feel like I've run a marathon even though I'm laying on my bathroom floor, and the only thing that will fix me is a Costco hot dog? Yeah, I think that's
That's
really funny. So, anyways, I'll cut that out,
You poor
but
thing. All kinds of
ah,
like yeah, all the sodium for you.
oh,
All
so much
the
salt,
Panda
yeah.
Express, all
There's
the Costco hot dogs.
1,800 milligrams of sodium in a Costco hot dog,
I
which
like
is
that
great for
totally
me,
tracks.
bad for everybody else. And funny
Turner
enough,
might
I
eat one
actually
of
did
those
have
every day.
Panda Express that night because I was like, "Jack, I need more salt."
Yes.
And we did, and I got the saltiest things I can at Panda Express, and the next day I was cured, so
There you go.
it's crazy.
Damn, girl.
Oh,
All right, which one are we
next
getting into next?
yeah, next up is the medical model. In the medical model of disability, a disability is perceived as an impairment of a body system or function that is inherently pathological. From
Mm,
this perspective, the goal is to return the system or function to as close to normal as possible. The medical model suggests that a professional with specialized training are the experts in the disability. Persons with disability are expected to follow the advice of said experts. The language of the medical model is clinical and very medical. That makes sense. This is one view that can sometimes be seen within the fields of health, mental health, and education, and I would agree because that's where we live. So,
mhm. I think this is probably kind of like the prevalent model in America for disability today, I would say.
I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of medicalized views of disability. I think that, yeah, I would say that that is the most prevalent view is that it can be medically intervened upon,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, and I think kind of like we've done with the other ones, pros and cons of this
mhm,
model. I would say a
mhm,
pro is that this is very focused on treatment.
mhm,
So it is and focused on like I guess like specificity and effectiveness of treatment. So this is where we kind of get a lot of like push for research and really understanding mechanisms of different disabilities so that we can devise treatments and medications that really are effective. So I think that it is kind of driving innovation in medicine, in healthcare, in technology, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that that is a positive of the medical model. I think that you also get, uh, well, yeah, I would say that's probably the primary positive of it.
I would say that this model serves different disabilities differently, and
Mhm,
so, well, granted, you and I are making kind of broad strokes here about disability as a whole, but if you have a disability that can be intervened upon with pharmacological interventions, this is gonna be a great place for you to be, and this is the lens you want to have because you can get medication and treatment and talk to a doctor, which is great, and then if you have something that maybe isn't as treatable with a medication that is kind of the harder side of this. I think another kind of negative with this one is that it can feel a little impersonal sometimes
mhm.
because it's so focused on the medicine and the professionals in it and not necessarily the person with the disability. However, I do think there once again, pros and cons to everything.
I think that there's not a ton of room for, I'm gonna say, like, gray area in this model. I think that
Yeah.
that kind of, like, you said in the definition, it was like a deficiency that needs to be fixed, addressed, tended to by some kind of medical intervention.
Yeah, they viewed it very pathologically, and
Yes.
so
My
it's
the
something
thing
to
that
be intervened upon.
first kinda comes to mind for this model is, like, the, invention of and, like, rise in cochlear
Mm,
implant
mhm,
surgeries. So, used to be that there were, different types of hearing aids that hearing impaired individuals could make use of, and that would sometimes boost hearing ability a little bit and allow them to access the hearing world in a way that was pretty much quote unquote normal. And then cochlear implants were invented. And so even babies that were born profoundly deaf could have some level of, again, quote unquote, normal or typical hearing. And I think that people see this as a universally good thing, but it has changed deaf culture and the way that, because deaf culture, if you are not aware, um, deaf individuals have a lot, not all, but a lot of deaf individuals are a part of this culture that has a really rich language system in American Sign Language. And I mean, I'm using the word culture very literally here. There's,
yeah. Capital D deaf culture, it's something that's it's
yes,
got its own language systems, it's beautiful, it's got history, and
yeah,
you're kinda touching on a really interesting point that I think flows nicely into the social model of disability,
mhm,
which is seen as one aspect of a person's identity, much like a race, ethnicity, and gender. From this perspective, disability is believed to result from a mismatch between a disabled person and the environment, and so to use your example of deafness, the mismatch is that not everybody knows sign language, and if
mhm,
more people knew sign language, deafness wouldn't be viewed as a disability, and so
yeah.
that's kind of I think that's a really unique example to bring up how these models serve very different purposes and lead to very different outcomes sometimes.
Yes. I think, as with all of them I've said, like, I don't think the medical model is 100% wrong, but I do think that it can really quickly lead to, like, othering of disabled people, of saying, and of, like, putting typically developing people or typically able or able-bodied people on this pedestal of, like, this is what we should all be shooting for, versus recognizing that people come in a number of shapes, sizes, and abilities, and there's not one kind of, like, specimen of humanity that we're really aiming for here.
I'm gonna let my dog in now. Poor buddy. For those of you who are
Yeah.
listening, we are recording this in January, and we just got dumped on with snow, and he is up to
Snowpocalypse.
his little elbows right now in snow, and I just let him out, so I'm gonna let him back in real fast.
Poor buddy. Oh gosh, I see the sun starting to come out here too, and I'm terrified. It's gonna be so bright.
God bless the budster. He knows how to wipe his paws, and so we put a towel down, and he just, like, dances on the towel, and it gets all the snow off his
Such
little
a good
peats.
boy.
He's such a good boy. Yeah, he's
Um,
up to his definite elbows, though, in snow.
yeah, thankfully Turner has taken the dog out on a leash earlier today, But in his defense, I took her out last night on a leash,
Okay,
so
another tangent, another
yeah.
tangent. So sorry. This darn dog stole a whole loaf of pumpkin bread off the countertop the other day, and I have never been more mad in my entire life.
Yes, thief.
Thief, thief. I had 1 slice, count it, 1 slice of bread, and he yoinked it. We left for dinner because we went out for dinner with my parents. This was on the night we were supposed to have book club,
Yeah.
and we came back, whole thing was gone. And I found it 2 days later, so I'm kinda mad about it too. So, he took it off the countertop, ate it on the middle of our rug, and so there's crumbs all over the darn rug. But 2 days later, I'm still recovering from being mad at the dog for eating the
Mhm.
pumpkin bread because I
Furious.
only had
Yeah.
1 slice, and I'm walking around the kitchen barefoot, and I usually like, wear socks or slippers around the house, and I stepped on, like, a crunchy spot on the floor, and I was like, What was that?" I leaned down, and it is a perfect loaf impression on the floor from where it, like, fell when he first stole it off the counter, and
Ooh,
it, like,
and it,
left
like,
a stain.
stuck, and oh my god.
And, like, dried, and we just didn't notice because we have brown floors, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Insult to injury, now I
yeah,
have to clean my floors."
yeah, Diamond famously stole a loaf of freshly baked bread off of my counter, and I hadn't even cut into it yet. Nobody got any bread except for Diamond, and I was
The
so mad at
greed,
her.
the greed is
It was
sickening.
yeah, this is the greed they write about in the Bible, like, it she and she immediately went to jail. We put her in her crate and told her that that was naughty dog behavior. She just stared blankly back at us.
Unfortunately for us, fortunately for Buddy's getting up there in age, and so we were like, "The fact that you could get up on the counter, I'm impressed at this point, so, like, I guess you earned it,
"You know
bud.
what, old man?
You
You
earned
won
this
this
one."
round." Yeah, no, Diamond was I mean, my dog is poorly behaved. She's not a well-behaved dog. But yeah, I was so mad at her. Oh, buddy.
Oh,
Oh my
Bubs.
gosh. Okay, so we were
Anyways.
in the middle of talking about the medical model
Mhm.
of disability and kind of going into the social model.
Yes.
So I do think that and I wonder if since we're kind of talking about both of these, I wonder if you've had the same experience, Francie, but when I have tried to explain the social model as either like an addition or an alternative to the medical model of disability, I've had people get mad, like have really strong emotional reactions to it. Um, and I wonder if you have also had that be the case.
I haven't,
Okay.
actually, because I very much think firmly in I like when those 2 models are blended together in a way that
Mhm,
is leading very person first, in kind of person-centered care from that way,
mhm.
using both the social and the medical model to treat them, but that's just me. I do find it best when we can combine the 2 because I find people need I've a lot of people I've worked with have benefited from some type of medical intervention in conjunction with some type of social change. Great example of the social model is if you are somebody in a wheelchair, the disability is not necessarily the wheelchair, but the fact that everybody has curbs and no curb cuts or stairs, right? If nobody had stairs, everybody had accessible elevators or curb cuts or bigger parking for you to get in and out of your car, it wouldn't be the issue that it is, right? And so I think there has to be some type of combination between the 2. I've never had people get mad at me for that though. So
Interesting.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I have definitely had heated conversations with people about the social model as an alternative to the medical model, and I agree with
See,
you.
I once again, my schooling was very whole person based,
Yep.
and so my university was very and, like, the schooling that I came from led with the social model in conjunction, like, where the social model was driving
Mhm,
and the medical model was in the back seat, but they were still in the same car together, and so that's not something that's hyper
hmm,
controversial for me because we took such a very care of the whole person based approach to all care, basically.
yeah. Yeah, and I think I wonder and it's probably different for every person
Mhm.
that has a strong emotional reaction to a different a lens that is different than the current worldview that they hold.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Nobody
have your
likes
worldview challenged. Nobody
That's where I was
likes that.
going with that, and this is what
Yeah.
I'm trying this is a much better way to explain this, trying to stretch your brain. because
Yeah.
nobody likes getting their views challenged. However, I think it's really important, specifically as a provider, to have your worldview about disability challenged because either it's gonna strengthen the view you have or open you up to a different point of view, and I think that's beneficial and that helps us grow as people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I am definitely a person and a practitioner that uses lenses from all of these
Mhm.
models that we've talked about. Like for each one, I can think of a pro and a con for each model. They there are definitely ones that I favor more than others, but yeah, I think that if your worldview is maybe really staunchly in one camp, then something presented as an alternative can feel like an attack, and maybe that's why I've sensed some hostility there. I do think that moving from the medical model to the social model, if that is really all that you know is that medical model, that is kind of a big lift. It's tough to reframe how you think about disability as
Yeah.
not like a broken version of a normal person, to be crass, and think about like, well, our society is actually what is broken
And
and
that's what it
is
calls for. It calls for us to change the environment and society as a whole rather than the person with a disability, and if you've lived your whole life not being in the perspective of a person with disability or never having your needs put second
mm,
or ever inconvenienced for another person, it's really challenging to a worldview if you have lived your life very individualistically to come in and be like, "Actually, if we want to make life for other people easier, we need to change the way that we're doing things," and I think that can make people feel very scared, and
yeah,
that can sometimes result in that, like, angry outbursts and things
yeah.
such as.
Well, something I was just thinking of too is that taking the onus off of medical intervention or off of the individual to be healed and on to society to take better care of
Mm,
differently abled and of disabled people puts the onus on able-bodied people, which that is again like I've heard this quote of like now I'm gonna just totally butcher it because I'm trying to do it off the top of my dome, but it's like uh basically like if you have never been discriminated against, equality feels like discrimination, where
yeah,
like if everything in your world has always been accessible to you and then suddenly things change to provide more access to more people, that can feel like an attack on you. But and another thing is like uh rights, more people getting rights doesn't take
doesn't
away from
take yours.
you. Like it's
Mhm,
rights, it's not pie kind of a
yeah.
thing. Like
I was
that
just about to say, my mom
yeah.
when my brother and I would, like, bicker over my mom, she would be like,
Yeah.
My sweet children, if my heart is a pie, one person's slice is not getting bigger or smaller, my pie is just getting bigger overall." And so, I think that's a great way to view this. Yeah, no, nobody's slices are getting bigger or smaller, the pie is just enlarging or getting bigger itself.
Yeah. Yeah, but, interesting. Okay, that has helped me kind of talk through this a little bit because I have always, uh, I don't know, I think the kind of verbal processing of those memories of, like, conversations I've had with
Yeah.
people where I'm like, "Whoa, why are we, like, fighting now?" is like, I was just trying to tell you what I learned in psych class today, like,
Why
why
are
are
we
we
fighting?
arguing? Yeah. That kind of helps it make more sense. And I've definitely been on the other end of that where someone is like, "Hey, here's an alternative to your worldview." And I'm like, "That hurts my feelings."
I'm
Like
not
that
doing it. Yeah,
well,
right?
I am not doing it. It takes practice and mental flexibility to kind of go there and to not feel offended. So yeah.
Truly, truly.
So I guess those are kind of the big four that I think of.
Do we wanna talk about, like, person-centered, family-centered, provider-centered care? We kinda mentioned those terms earlier. Or do
Um,
we want to talk more about, things such as terms like ableism or accessibility and accommodations, and what do
I
you think? Oh,
would
I keep muting this tab on accident.
I think where I like instinctively want to go from here is talking about why I think it's like because of these models is the reason why we have like so many different terms. And there's like
Yeah.
person-centered language versus identity-centered language and um, terms like ableism, terms
Mhm.
like uh, difference versus disability,
Mhm.
even, conversations surrounding like should autism spectrum disorder be
Yeah, is
called
it a
disorder?
mhm.
Because I think that's all born out of these different lenses.
Yeah.
Even changing of things like handicap from the phrase handicap
Yeah.
to disabled, and kind of the difference, that journey there, going moving from a kind of a charity model to a,
Yeah.
well, frankly, medical model, but
No, you're
more
right,
social.
because these models are important because they help us to frame and use language to understand the world around us, and I feel like language is such a driver when we're obviously, language is a driver when we're trying to understand things, and so each of these models have come with new vocab
Mhm.
that helps us to better describe a person's lived experience to help share and build empathy and better care for individuals. So, no, I think you're so right in that.
Yeah, that is something that, and I know it can be stressful, especially as a person that doesn't live in a world where, or I guess just by that I mean like maybe doesn't work in a field with disabled people. This isn't always on the front of your mind to use a term and then have somebody be like, actually, that's not the term we use anymore. It can feel
Yeah,
very combative. I think that a lot of times people aren't trying to be combative, but it can feel personal when someone corrects you. Um, but yeah, these terms change really often. And yeah, like I was saying, the term handicap used to be a lot more popular. A friend actually taught me this. I didn't know the history of that term, but it comes from like cap in hand of like someone begging for
oh my
money,
gosh.
basically as a person who can't work because they're physically disabled. So that kind of comes from that charity model of like if we call something handicap accessible or handicap parking, it carries with it the history of this term of a person begging essentially for charity. So if we move away from that term to something like disabled parking or accessible parking,
Which
both
is
of
a little
those
bit more medicalized terms,
a
but
little more medicalized. I would say maybe disabled parking is kind of more medical. Accessible parking might be more social,
I would
I
agree with
wonder.
that.
Like,
No, I totally agree with that.
so language is important. The words we use are very important because they carry different connotations, and language shapes our culture, which shapes our worldview, which shapes how we treat people. So it is important that these words change often, but it can be stressful to keep up with them, especially if you're trying to be a good person and trying to be conscientious and not offend people or hurt people's feelings.
Absolutely. Kind of to highlight how quickly language changes. When I was going through undergrad and grad school, we were pushed hard that we use person first language when we talk about the people that we work with. So it's the person with a whatever their disability is. It's a person with a disability. So a child with autism, a person with cerebral palsy. So the person comes first in talking about it rather than the disability coming first. And since that time in grad school, people in the autistic community have come forward to say, actually, I really prefer identity first language, which is an autistic person, because their diagnosis of autism impacts so much of their personality that to describe their experience, they would rather go with these terms. So, and that was just in 6 years. So
Yeah,
these things change very quickly. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I would also say that they're not universal
Mm,
too.
no.
So and this is why like I tend to use identity first language in general, just because that is what I've heard from a lot of self advocates, that they prefer, especially autistic self advocates. But I will say that not everybody prefers that, and that's
Mm-mm.
not everybody's lens. So
No.
either families of people that are severely disabled, or so for example, like parents of a teenager with profound autism may not prefer the term autistic teenager because they do want to put, autism in a place in their child's life that it's not their whole story. It's not their whole thing. It's not a part of their identity. It's something that they deal with, but it's not their life necessarily. So it would be a child with autism or a teenager with autism. And that kind of, it puts a little bit of linguistic distance between the diagnosis and the person, and that can be really helpful for people. So I absolutely respect whatever. I usually follow, like, especially if it's a patient or a client, I follow their lead. So if I hear them use person-centered versus identity-centered language, I will use
Yeah.
that when speaking to them. But yeah, I switch back and forth for sure.
Same here. It's about a 50-50 split depending upon if I know the family or the person's preference to talk about it. Um,
Mhm.
I will follow their lead on that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that is kind of another, this might be a whole different topic for another day, but it can be hard to know what is the right term. And right in air quotes, like what is the correct terminology to use, because a lot of terminology is developed by advocates who either are really close to a community or a part of a community themselves. But as with many things, like all people with autism or autistic people are not homogenous, like they're not a monolith. There's, lots of variance within there. Same thing for Down syndrome, same thing for mobility aid users, same thing for people with limb differences. Like there are, differences and different preferences within those communities too. So yeah, you just got to kind of be flexible, but it's hard.
and I think that's where being gracious with each other to make those mistakes and learn from those mistakes is so
Mhm.
important, which once again, going back to the pluses and minuses of these lenses, you can spin either way, but you have to be able to grow and learn and view things from other perspectives in order to have respectful conversations going forward. So
Totally.
that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about models of disability?
I don't know if this is your first kind of introduction to disability. I think this is a kind of good place to start. Disability is so nuanced, and this is something that people, I feel like we say this phrase a lot on this channel, but this is something people get PhDs in, right? People study
Mhm.
this their whole lives. And it's something that is natural and normal. And there is just a wide perception of disability, and it's really fascinating when you really get into it. So, also disability across cultures, historically even, fascinating as well. There's, I'm sure, disability anthropologists and historians out there who have very interesting stories to tell. So, I don't know, disability is part of the human experience, and to view
Mhm.
it from different perspectives helps you to be a better practitioner, or if you are not in a practitioner role, just a more understanding person overall. So,
Yeah, agree. Yeah. So I feel like that's that on that, at least for today. But
This can be an ongoing conversation if
yes.
it's ever evolving, so
Yeah. Yeah. And we might revisit this and talk about some lesser known models, because these four I definitely was already kind of familiar with as
Mhm,
a non-expert. So I
mhm,
wonder, I would be curious to hear about kind of some more niche or like
mhm.
less prevalent ones maybe. But until that is the case, this is Tell Me About It. We are available on YouTube and Spotify under Tell Me About It and SLP podcast. And you can also find us on Instagram at Tell Me About It SLP. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.